quiet night, the kind where shadows stretch long and silence feels heavier than usual. But then, a scream pierced through the darkness, a sound so chilling that it sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The police arrived at the scene, a dimly lit apartment with no signs of forced entry. The victim lay motionless, eyes wide open, as if frozen in terror. No weapon, no struggle, no apparent clue, just an eerie stillness that made the case even more baffling. Detectives scanned the room, searching for anything that could break the mystery. At first glance, it seemed like a crime without a trace. But little did the killer know, a single, seemingly insignificant mistake had already sealed their fate. At Crime Chronicles Confidential, we bring you the most gripping real-life cases, where a single misstep can unravel even the most carefully planned crimes. If you love unraveling mysteries and following real investigations, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the truth always finds its way out. It was just another ordinary night in the city, until a desperate call shattered the silence. A woman's trembling voice reported a horrifying discovery, a lifeless body found in a locked apartment. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights painted the streets as police rushed to the scene. The apartment door was closed but unlocked, an unusual detail that immediately raised suspicion. Inside, the room was eerily quiet, almost undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no signs of struggle. The victim, a man in his early 40s, lay sprawled on the floor, his eyes wide open, frozen in a final expression of shock. The scene puzzled the detectives. There was no blood, no visible wounds, nothing to indicate how he had died. A heart attack? Poison? A staged crime? They needed answers. They carefully examined the surroundings. The furniture remained untouched, no valuables were missing, and the victim's phone was still on the table. It didn't look like a robbery gone wrong. But then, something even stranger emerged. There were no fingerprints anywhere. Not on the doorknob, not on the furniture, not even on the victim's own belongings. It was as if someone had wiped everything clean. The detectives questioned the neighbors, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The victim lived alone, rarely had visitors, and had no known enemies. It was as if it simply died under impossible circumstances, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions. But the investigators knew one thing for certain. No crime is ever truly perfect. Somewhere in that room, hidden within the details, was a single mistake. A mistake that would eventually lead them straight to the killer. As the police entered the apartment, a wave of unease filled the air. The dim lighting, the untouched furniture, and the unnatural stillness of the room made the crime scene feel almost surreal. Officers moved cautiously, their eyes scanning every inch for anything out of place. The victim's body lay motionless in the center of the room. No signs of struggle, no blood, no immediate indication of what had happened. But one thing was clear. Something wasn't right. Detective Rafik, a seasoned investigator with years of experience, stepped forward. He had seen countless crime scenes, but this one felt different. He crouched beside the body, studying the expression frozen on the victim's face. Eyes wide open, lips slightly parted, a look of sheer terror. But why? Poisoning, one officer suggested. Maybe a natural cause? Another speculated. But Rafik wasn't convinced. There was no glass, no spilled liquid, no pill bottles in sight. Everything seemed too clean, too perfect. His gaze shifted to surroundings. The door wasn't forced open. Nothing appeared stolen. If this was a robbery, it made no sense. And yet, the victim's phone, keys, and wallet were right there, untouched. A crime scene usually tells a story, but this one was silent, eerily silent. No broken objects, no overturned furniture, no desperate struggle for life. It was as if death had arrived quietly, leaving behind only a mystery. The forensic team arrived, setting up their equipment, dusting for fingerprints, collecting samples. But as they worked, something even more bizarre became apparent. There were no prints, not on the victim's belongings, not on the table, not on the doorknob. It was as if someone had deliberately erased every trace of themselves. The question was no longer just how the victim had died. It was who had done it. And why had they gone to such lengths to cover their tracks? The forensic team moved swiftly, setting up their equipment as the detectives watched in anticipation. Every crime scene, no matter how carefully staged, always held a clue, something the killer overlooked. And this one would be no different. Under the glow of ultraviolet light, the investigators scanned every inch of the apartment. The lack of fingerprints was concerning, almost unnatural. It suggested deliberate effort, wiped surfaces, gloves, or perhaps something more sophisticated. But no one can erase every trace of their presence. They turned their attention to the victim's body. His skin showed no immediate signs of struggle, no bruises, no wounds. Toxicology tests were ordered to check for poison, but those results would take time. Until then, they needed something solid. Then, a forensic analyst made an observation. The victim's right hand was slightly curled, fingers resting on the cold floor. Beneath his nails, something unusual. Small, almost invisible fibers. They were carefully extracted and placed in a sterile container for further analysis. Meanwhile, another investigator focused on the floor near the doorway. At first glance, it appeared spotless. But under closer inspection, they found a single faint smudge, a partial shoe print. It was barely visible, possibly from a sock or a carefully cleaned shoe, but it was there. The real breakthrough came when they examined the victim's phone. The last open application wasn't a call, a message, or even social media. It was a recording app, a voice memo, only a few seconds long. The forensic expert pressed play. A faint rustling sound, heavy breathing. Then a single chilling whisper, "Why are you here?" The audio cut off. The room fell silent. The victim had recorded something, maybe his last moments. And though the killer had wiped the scene clean, they had made a fatal error. They had left behind just enough of the truth to emerge. Detective Rafik played the audio recording again, this time through noise-filtering software. The background rustling became clearer. A faint shuffle, as if someone had turned suddenly. A controlled breath. And then silence. The forensic team enhanced the audio further. Hidden beneath the whisper, there was something else. A soft but distinct click. Rafik's mind raced. It wasn't a gun, nor a door latch. It sounded mechanical. A button? A switch? Then it struck him. A retractable pen. He turned to the forensic team. Check the crime scene again. Look for a pen, one that doesn't belong here. Minutes later, one of the investigators called out. In the corner of the room, near the base of a bookshelf, they found it. A sleek black pen, partially rolled under furniture. It seemed ordinary, but when they dusted it for prints, there they were. The only prints found in the entire apartment. The killer had been meticulous. They had wiped down everything. The doorknobs, the phone, even the victim's skin to remove any possible struggle marks. But in a moment of carelessness, they had left behind the one thing they likely use out of habit. The pen had been clicked open, perhaps a nervous tick, a brief distraction. And then, in the chaos of covering their tracks, they had forgotten it. The forensic team ran the prints through the database. The system processed the data, analyzing loops and ridges. Then, a match appeared on the screen. A name, a face. The killer had unknowingly signed their own confession. The room was silent as the detectives stared at the forensic report. The fingerprints on the pen had led them straight to a name, someone the victim knew, someone no one had suspected. Detective Rafik took a deep breath. The case had seemed flawless, a crime executed with precision, leaving behind no trace. But the killer had made one crucial mistake, an unconscious habit, a reflex so minor they hadn't even realized it. The retractable pen. It wasn't just any pen. It was a high-end, custom-engraved model, one that wasn't commonly found. The killer had likely pulled it out, clicked it open absent-mindedly, while waiting, perhaps while watching the victim take his final breaths. And in the rush to wipe down every surface, every object, they had forgotten about the smallest thing they had touched. A single click had undone everything. Now, armed with the fingerprint evidence, the detectives revisited security footage from the building. No cameras were inside the apartment, but the lobby had one, grainy footage, but enough to identify a silhouette entering at the right time. The suspect had covered their face, taken precautions. But there was one problem: the shoes. The faint smudge found on the floor matched the exact sole pattern of a rare designer shoe, one that the suspect had been seen wearing just days earlier in a social media post. Everything was falling into place. The killer had planned every detail, erased every trace, but in the end, a nervous habit and a fashion choice had sealed their fate. Now, there was nowhere left to hide. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but Detective Rafik knew they needed more. The fingerprints on the pen were a breakthrough, but to build an airtight case, they needed additional proof, something that placed the suspect at the scene without a shred of doubt. The forensic team turned their attention back to the victim's phone. The last opened app was a recording, evidence that the victim had sensed danger. But there was something else. The phone's location history revealed that someone had unlocked it just minutes before the estimated time of death. Could it have been the killer? The tech analyst traced recent activity. A message draft was found, half-typed but never sent. The words were chilling. He is here. Who was he? The answer lay in the phone's metadata. The last Wi-Fi connection showed an unknown device had linked to the apartment's network around the same time. Cross-referencing the IP address led to another shocking revelation. The device was registered under the suspect's name. Now, they had digital proof. But there was one final piece: the security footage. Detectives examined the grainy lobby camera recording. The figure entering the building had been careful, wearing a cap, keeping their head down, avoiding direct angles. But what they hadn't realized was a reflection. As the suspect passed by the entrance, a glass panel caught their partial face. A brief but clear enough reflection for facial recognition software to analyze. It was undeniable. Fingerprints on the pen, a phone connection, a half-typed message, and now a reflection captured at the worst possible moment. The killer had erased their traces, but technology had traced them back. The case was no longer a mystery. It was just a matter of time before the arrest. The case had reached its turning point. The detectives now had everything they needed: fingerprints on the pen, the victim's unsent message, phone data linking the suspect to the crime scene, and the damning security footage reflection. But to ensure conviction, they needed to bring the suspect in without tipping them off. Detective Rafik devised a plan. Instead of an immediate arrest, they sent a simple request, asking the suspect come in for routine questioning as part of a general investigation. The suspect agreed, confident they had covered their tracks. Inside the interrogation room, the suspect sat across from Rafik, appearing calm, even slightly amused. They answered every question smoothly, denying any connection to the victim's death. But then, Rafik placed a single object on the table: the pen. A flicker of recognition flashed across the suspect's face, so brief it could have been missed. But Rafik caught it. He leaned in. Strange, isn't it? No prints anywhere in the apartment, except on this. The suspect stiffened but quickly regained composure. "That's not mine," they said flatly. Rafik smiled. "You're right. It belongs to the killer." He slid the forensic report across the table. "And the killer's fingerprints? They match yours." Silence. The suspect's breathing grew shallow. Before they could respond, Rafik continued. "We also have footage. You were careful, but you missed something: a reflection in the lobby glass. And your phone? It automatically connected to the victim's Wi-Fi." He tossed another document in front of them, the digital evidence report. The suspect's confidence crumbled. The weight of the evidence was too strong. They exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping, as if realizing there was no escape. Moments later, they whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." But it was too late for explanations. The suspect was placed under arrest. The courtroom trial that followed was swift, each piece of evidence stacking against them like a wall they couldn't break through. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict. Guilty. The sentence was pronounced, the gavel struck, and justice was served. The case was closed. But for the detectives, it was a reminder that no matter how smart a criminal thinks they are, one small mistake is all it takes to bring them down. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal experts, and curious onlookers filled the seats, eager to witness how the prosecution would dismantle the defense. At the center of it all sat the accused, silent, expressionless, yet visibly tense. The trial had begun. The prosecution wasted no time. They presented the first piece of evidence, the pen. Holding it up for the jury, the lawyer spoke firmly. This is the only object in the victim's apartment with fingerprints. And those fingerprints belong to the defendant. A forensic expert took the stand, confirming the findings. The jury listened intently. Next came the security footage. Though blurry, the moment of truth arrived when the prosecutor paused the video, zooming in on the suspect's reflection in the lobby glass. "You tried to hide," the prosecutor continued, "but you didn't account for reflection. This is you, entering the building at the exact time of the crime." The suspect shifted uncomfortably. Their lawyer objected, arguing that reflections could be misleading. But the prosecution wasn't done. "Let's talk about the victim's phone," the prosecutor said, pulling up the digital records. "The victim tried to send a message before dying, 'He is here,' but he never got the chance." The courtroom was silent. The jury's expressions darkened. "And this," the prosecutor continued, displaying another document, "is the network log. The defendant's phone automatically connected to the victim's Wi-Fi. That only happens when a known device enters the range." The defense scrambled to counter. They claimed coincidence, misunderstanding, even technical errors. But the facts were undeniable. One by one, the prosecution laid out every mistake the killer had made. The pen, the reflection, the phone connection. Each detail formed a chain, unbreakable in its logic. Then came the final blow. The forensic team had enhanced the victim's last recorded message. Though faint, the background noise revealed something chilling, a faint click. The sound of this, the prosecutor said, clicking a retractable pen, a nervous habit, caught in the last moments before crime was committed. The courtroom held its breath. The jury had heard enough. After hours of deliberation, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The sentence was read aloud, the judge's voice firm, final. The accused lowered their head, knowing there was no escape. The case had been cracked not by confessions, not by witnesses, but by a series of seemingly small mistakes that led to undeniable proof. Justice had been served. As the gavel struck, the courtroom echoed with the finality of justice. The guilty verdict had been delivered, and the weight of the truth settled over everyone in the room. The accused sat motionless, their carefully crafted lies dismantled piece by piece. There was no more room for denial, no loopholes left to exploit. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed to break the news. The public had followed this case with intense curiosity, captivated by the seemingly perfect crime that had unraveled due to one small mistake. Experts dissected every detail. How the absence of fingerprints had first seemed like the work of a mastermind but had instead pointed to deliberate tampering. How a simple recording had preserved the victim's last attempt to expose the truth, and how a mere reflection had shattered the killer's illusion of secrecy. For the detectives, this was more than just another closed case. It was proof that no crime, no matter how meticulously planned, is ever truly flawless. A single overlooked detail, a nervous click of a pen, a phone's automatic connection, a footprint barely visible to the naked eye, had undone everything. Justice had triumphed, but the case left behind a lingering lesson. The truth always finds a way to surface. And those who think they can outsmart the law will always learn, sometimes too late, that every action, no matter how small, leaves a trace. The crime had been exposed. The guilty had been punished. And in the end, justice had prevailed. Crime is never truly perfect. No matter how carefully a criminal plans, how many precautions they take, or how well they erase their tracks, one mistake is all it takes to unravel everything. This case proved that justice always finds a way. A single overlooked detail, a nervous habit, a tiny fragment of evidence. These small missteps became the undoing of a seemingly perfect crime. The killer believed they had covered everything, but the truth was always there, waiting to be uncovered. This is the reality of crime. The law may take time, the investigation may face challenges, but in the end, no criminal can escape forever. Sooner or later, their mistake catches up with them. What do you think was the biggest mistake in this case? Was it the missing fingerprints? The forgotten pen? The phone's digital trail? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love real-life crime mysteries, make sure to subscribe to Crime Chronicles Confidential so you never miss a case. Justice always wins, and we're here to uncover the truth one case at a time. No matter how calculated a crime is, one small mistake can bring it all crashing down. In this case, the killer thought they had erased every trace, but the truth was hidden in the details. Was it the forgotten pen with fingerprints? The victim's unfinished message? The security footage reflection? Or the phone's automatic connection to Wi-Fi? Every crime has a weak spot, and in the end, justice prevailed. What do you think was the killer's biggest mistake? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love real crime mysteries, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Chronicles Confidential for more cases where the truth always finds its way out. If you love unraveling real-life crime mysteries and seeing how even the smallest mistakes lead to justice, then you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe to Crime Chronicles Confidential and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Every crime has a story, every clue holds a secret, and every episode brings you closer to the truth. Join us as we expose the most shocking crimes, because in the end, justice always wins.